Redditors who go into people's houses for their job. What is the strangest / creepiest thing you've ever seen or experienced? Part 2. When I was young, we used to clean up after fires. The soot goes everywhere, so everything has to be cleaned. Insurance covers it. Even dildos, Polaroid nudes, and all other adult toys. We would have to go through their drawers and clean everything, and I always warned them. This was in the late 80s, so there was no internet then, but Polaroid nudes were popular at that time. As for creepiest, I once had to attempt to clean a fancy chair that had had a rotting corpse on it for weeks. The chair was expensive, so we had to prove that it wasn't cleanable to the insurance company. For 20 years, I've spent my summers designing home theater systems. After the installers finish, I go by the house a few days later to check on things. Fully 75% of the time I hit play on the DVD player, porn starts playing. And yet I forget to check before hitting play, every damn time. Not sure who's dumber, the clients or me. Oh, and the recent one, I went by the client's house to do the usual check-in. He showed me his wall of heroes in the foyer. It consisted of framed, autographed pictures of Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, and Henry Lee Lucas. And a few others I'm forgetting. Plus, some framed letters from them. Wall of heroes, indeed. My wife is a physical therapist who does home health visits. She has seen some shit. Several hoarders. People who have bizarrely huge collections of curios like snow globes, crosses, and one lady who had a disturbingly huge collection of Princess Diana memorabilia. Several old guys, who tried to subtly proposition her for sexual favors. Then there was the one old guy who was recovering from a knee replacement and flat out said something like, "I haven't had a blowjob in like 20 years. Is that something you do?" Crazy cat ladies. They are real. And sometimes their houses are infested with fleas. There was a lady who had experienced a stroke and had lost a good chunk of her impulse control as well as mobility on one side of her body. Every single time my wife saw her, there were 2 dildos on her kitchen counter, in plain view of the living room where my wife worked with the patient. When I was in college, I was a pizza delivery driver for a small local pizzeria in a very upscale area. I saw some weird and/or cool stuff, but this one stands out. This takes place over a couple of weeks. While not out on a delivery, the drivers answer the phones to take orders. I took an order from an obviously drunk man. Fast forward a few days, and take another order from the same guy. Again, he is very drunk. A few days later, I came into work, and there was a message posted by the phones to not take orders from the address of the drunk guy. He had written bad checks to pay for the pizzas he had ordered. He calls again. Drunk. I tell him we cannot take his order because of the bad checks. He begs me. It sounds like he is crying. I say it's okay if he pays cash, and he says he will. Another driver gets sent with the pizza and instructions to only accept cash. About 20 minutes later, the driver calls to say that the guy doesn't have any cash. The guy wants the driver to bring him to an ATM, and I tell the driver just to come back. When the driver gets back, he's almost in tears. The guy is pathetic. He's wasted drunk, and there are bottles scattered all over his beautiful place. I put the pizza on top of the oven since, after the shift, we get to eat the mistakes. The guy calls back. He's crying, begging for food, and I tell him there's nothing I can do. He says he hasn't eaten in however long. Again, I buckle and tell him I'll give him the pizza after the shift if nobody wants to eat it. A few hours later, the pizza is still in the oven, so I drive it over to the guy's house. I knock on the door. I can hear something going on inside but no answer. As I turn to leave, the door opens and the guy invites me in. I try to decline. I just want to give him the food and leave, but he insists he wants to pay me. We walk into the kitchen, and there must be 100 empty vodka bottles. He pours himself another vodka, and he gets his checkbook. He offers me a drink, and I decline. He apologizes for the way he answered the door. He said hookers have been coming over and stealing from him. In the middle of writing the check, we are making small talk. I don't recall exactly how, but I try to tell him he needs to get some help, rehab. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and she gets really scared and shushes me. He said it's probably a hooker coming back to steal more. The door opens, and a woman walks in. I'm really freaked now, thinking it's a murderous hooker. She's obviously freaked by my presence. It's his wife. She tells me she's his wife and wants to know who I was, and I tell her I'm just delivering pizza. Once we get everything sorted out, she's a bit dubious but pleasant. She tells me the guy's sad story. He fell off the wagon, so she left him, knew all about the hookers, etc., and has frozen his money. She wrote me a personal check for the pizza with a generous tip, which I cashed and, after giving the pizza place its cut, Split the tip with the other driver, about $10 each. Fast forward a few days. I'm back at work, and the boss hands me a letter. It is from the woman thanking me to my boss. My kindness convinced her husband to go back into rehab. My boss asked what I was thinking. It was none of my business to get involved. I got fired. Boiler repairs. 4 sons in the house, playing Xbox, all mentally ill, rooms 2 foot deep in takeaway trays. A duck and a rat loose in the other room. The mother was just in her underwear with a fresh kidney transplant scar around her middle. The hot pipe had snapped off the washing machine and was running the combi boiler flat out. She had tied the pipe into the sink. How long has it been like that for? I said. About 6 weeks, she said. The bottom had dropped out of the wall units because of the steam. The carpet in the duck/rat room was sodden with piss and crap. I went into the lads' rooms. They never flinched or acknowledged me. One was holding the controller, but the TV was off. I'm a firefighter/EMT, so finding a dead body is pretty normal, but one will always stay with me. There was this middle-aged guy who lived in his van out in a parking lot somewhat out of town. He never bothered anybody, so the police just let him stay there. It was around the middle of July in Arizona, so about 105 to 110 degrees heat, and we got a call to go check on him. Nobody had seen him for a while, and somebody had complained of a foul odor coming from his van. We all knew what we were going to find, but nothing could prepare us for what we actually came across. I opened the back door to his van, and a cloud of flies flew out so thick you couldn't see through it. I was immediately punched in the face by the stench of death, and when the flies cleared out, we finally got a look at what was in there. The guy had been dead for at least 2 weeks, and his cats had survived by eating the fleshier parts of his body. I've seen my fair share of dead bodies, but something about a guy who had been in a van for 2 weeks in Arizona summer heat with cats eating his body that just sticks with you. Babysitting. The kid wanted to watch this supposed kids movie. It was some Jewish kids show, some creepy guy in a teddy bear costume, and a ton of makeup, and it had a really rapey vibe. I remember one part, in particular, it was talking about Roman Caesars, because why not? And of course, this creepy old guy was the Caesar, and all these little girls were around him like his freaking harem or something. There may or may not have been some light spanking involved, and I just couldn't stop thinking about what must have been going on behind the scenes. Worse than any horror movie. Not me but my mom. She's a visiting physical therapist. She used to work in a small city in the area, with some bad areas. She had to do therapy for a rather overweight guy who was pretty paranoid about the people in his complex. Granted, most of us would be too, but my mom sat down on the couch and felt something hard underneath the cushion. She had the guy get what it was, and it was a stick with a large knife taped to the end. She had almost sat on the knife too. She asked him if there was anything else like that in or around the area she needed to work in, and he managed to remove multiple knives, makeshift spears, and a syringe-based weapon. He was HIV positive. My mom discharged him shortly. I worked for a greenery in Great Neck, Long Island, from 1994-96 when I was in high school. It was my first time being exposed to 1% homes. We had a couple of corporate clients. One was a brokerage called Stratton Oakmont. The new CEO was a guy named Al Lipsky, who was an ex-furniture salesman. That was weird, but everything was weird in that place. The owners got high 3x a day, and one of them sent me out for cranberry juice and a large cup of ice for his vodka as we closed the shop. When Stratton got set up, our job was to furnish both it and the CEO's home, which was on a golf course. Those guys laughed and smoked and bragged about being able to legally steal from people. It was apparent that they all answered to this guy Jordan, who I only saw in passing. Okay, on to the creepy part. In my senior year of high school, we had these 2 FBI agents come into my constitutional law class and talk to us about a career in law enforcement. The usual stuff, what it takes to get accepted, what skills are most valuable. During the Q&A, one agent confessed that his job wasn't glamorous drug busts but crooked stock exchange trades. I raised my hand and asked if he meant guys like Stratton Oakmont. His face froze, and he coughed out a yes. I said, "Oh yeah, I know all those guys," not a humble teen sigh. After class the next day, my teacher kept me behind and said those guys wanted to talk to me. Now it was my turn to freeze, and I said no way. I was still 17, a minor, and I wasn't talking to anyone. 20 years later, they made the movie The Wolf of Wall Street. I spent a lot of time in the home of the Jonah Hill character. Part of my work is to go out and do in-home evaluations for the remodeling people want. Usually, but not always, they either come into our shop before the visit, Or we talk about when they want to come in while we are scheduling a visit. This woman calls and wants to schedule a home visit. She hasn't been in and doesn't seem interested in coming in. It's unusual, but whatever they call, I go out. She answers the door and is objectively beautiful. Slender, long dark hair, painted toenails, wearing a flowing dress. She invites me in, and all the curtains are drawn, and shades are down. The house has nearly every wall and flat surface decorated with pictures of her and her husband, their wedding, their vacations. Everything is a display of their wedded bliss. There is also a long gun in a case standing in one corner. I can't tell if it's a rifle or a shotgun, but it's there. And there's a Victoria's Secret bag on her dining room table. We proceed to have one of the most awkward discussions I've ever had in a house. She talks about all of the projects. We look at the kitchen, the downstairs bathroom, the stairs themselves, but somehow, she doesn't talk about them like she's really going to do them. And the way she's talking to me is outrageously suggestive. And she is hot and ready to go. You have to understand that the worst thing a guy could do in my position would be to overinterpret a woman's interest while visiting her home. Bad, bad, bad. Beyond that, while I think I'm attractive, I could have been anybody. It's not like she came into the shop and liked me and then asked me to come out for an appointment, and she just called in. And then she says, "We were having drinks with the neighbors across the street last night. Your company did some work over there. My girlfriend said that if I asked you, you would touch my carpet," and my husband got really mad when he heard that. And then I got this vision that all this was a setup for their sexual fantasy where the husband comes home to find some guy banging his wife and grabs the gun in the corner and shoots him, and they have crazy sex on top of the body. Or something. But the vibe was out of control. So, I said, "Do you want me to touch your carpet?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, okay, but that's extra." No, actually, I did not say that. I bailed. Later that day, she did come into the shop, but she was an angry mess sniffling like she'd just finished some coke, and I can't tell you how glad I managed not to get tangled up with her, despite the temptation.